I just walked by Paulie, and Paulie goes, there's only 3 teams that can win the national title in college football. I go, save it. All right. Before we get to Paul Finebaum, I'm going to ask you the question, and then I'll let Paul Finebaum judge your answer.
Right now, based off who's in and who's out, I think there's 3 teams that can win the national title. Oregon, Texas, and Notre Dame. They're the only 3 teams playing consistently good football.
All right. Let's bring in Paul Finebaum, host of the Paul Finebaum Show, voice of the SEC. What do you think of that, Paul?
It's not a bad answer. I might add Georgia, although I realize we all just watched an 8 overtime game, but I think they're capable. And I'm going to surprise you here. There's one more who could win it. I thought they were the most talented team a week ago, and then I forgot who was coaching them. Ohio State.
Ohio State's loss at home to Michigan or Alabama's loss to Oklahoma? What was worse in your opinion?
It was Ohio State because Alabama it was on the road. They're not a perfect team, but and they didn't quite spend $20 million like Ohio State to fill out their roster. I think, and also the narrative. I mean, we're talking about 3 straight losses, all to Jim Harbaugh in what Ohio State and Michigan fans believe is the biggest game in the country. And then it happens again. Dan, that's inexplicable. There's no excuse for it because I really thought going into the season that if Ryan Day, here I get to the lead, lost that game and somehow was embarrassed or didn't make it to the championship game, that he probably should be fired. And quite frankly, that hasn't changed. I know the athletic director came out last night with one of these word salads saying, oh, he's our guy. That same athletic director, Ross Bjork, you may remember 2 years ago in the middle of the season, said similar things about Jimbo Fisher. And then at the end of the season, fired him and gave him a $76 million goodbye gift.
Okay. If there wasn't a 12-team playoff, Ryan Day would be what?
I think he would be fired. And quite frankly, it would be justified. I am well aware his record is 66-10. He's been to the CFP championship game. He's been to the playoffs a couple of times. But in states like that, and Dan, I don't need to educate you. You're from one of those states. That game is really bigger than life. And, after the first one, after the second one, after the third one, but after the fourth one, and I tell you the line that got me more than any other line, it wasn't his coaching, which is atrocious. It was the fact that he defended his players for getting into a brawl that required pepper gas and who knows what else, defending the field. I mean, Ryan, you had all year to prepare for that game and 60 minutes and 4 hours in real time to win the game. What your players did after the game was beyond embarrassing. And I know that's a whole nother narrative today, but that single statement alone, in my mind, was fireable.
What's happened with the flag planting that all of a sudden it's become the rage with the kids? Do you think the NCAA does anything with this?
Yeah, I mean, they should. I think ultimately it's up to the individual conferences, and I feel very certain that conferences are going to put an end to it. I mean, it is too dangerous. We've both been on fields at the end of the game. It's chaotic. And then when you have brawls with players, big guys with shoulder pads and helmets, and there are a lot of idle people on those fields that could really be hurt or killed. And give Steve Sarkisian credit, the Texas coach. He saw this all day long happening, and he warned his team: if we win this game, which they did at Texas A&M, don't do it. And it's just absurd. There's no reason for it. I mean, I really like guys who lose the home game and then they're going to go out and try to win a fight. I mean, where are we? What's happening here?
If Georgia had lost to Georgia Tech, ...
It would have not been the end of the season for them, incredibly. They would have still gone to Atlanta with a chance to not only win the SEC, but get a first-round bye. That's how crazy the system is. But we already knew that. It was what you saw in that game as the clock struck midnight was why Kirby Smart is the best coach in the country. I mean, he finally said, okay, I know we got a defensive coordinator, but I'm making every call right now. and he dialed it up correctly, literally every time. Of course, you get a timeout in overtime, so that's a lot of timeouts. And maybe we can talk about maybe the overtime system needs to be changed. That's absurd to watch 2-point conversions over and over again. But it was really impressive. And by the way, I'm not making excuses for Georgia, but Georgia Tech has a win over Miami, a team that is sitting on the CFP bubble right now.
The USC loss. I know you have expressed your thoughts with Lincoln Riley. Notre Dame looked really good. Really good. I don't know if Notre Dame may be the story coming away from that as opposed to USC getting really embarrassed at home. What should be the story? What Notre Dame did or what USC didn't do again?
Well, I was impressed with Notre Dame, and I think now they are a legitimate national champion. But would someone in California explain to me why Lincoln Riley, as of almost noon Eastern time, is still the head coach at Southern Cal? What has he done? He had the one season, Dan, with Caleb Williams. Last year I thought that was a disaster, but then again, I forgot about this season. And considering their record is 500, that includes a win over LSU in the opening game. I mean, I don't know when I've seen a coach underperform. I was wondering early in the year, maybe somebody in the NFL would hire him. But hire him as what? I mean, maybe a coordinator. I think he has completely outlived his usefulness at Southern Cal. He shouldn't be there any longer.
Yeah, but I can't imagine that they're going to be, in the business of big buyouts here.
I'm not either. I know a lot of people laughed at me in July when I made that outrageous Deion Sanders for Lincoln Riley take, which I remember hearing on the Dan Patrick show a few times. By the way, I mean, I've been right and wrong on Deion 100 times, as we all have, but I just think that continuing on, especially now in the portal era, what's the appeal? Remember when he moseyed out there a couple of years ago and was going to make that place sizzling in Tinseltown. But I mean, I don't get it. Listen, I know I get accused of calling for coaches firings all the time. I really don't. But in this case, I think it's legitimate because USC is one of the golden names in college football, and now it's become a laughingstock.
Deion's done a really good job here with recruiting. I think, does that put an end to Deion leaving Colorado at least this next season?
I think until the last NFL job is filled, his name is going to be dancing out there because maybe I just don't believe when coaches say anything, but the fact that he's happy out there and now that his son and best recruit ever are leaving, to me makes me wonder a little bit. I mean, he beat the house this year. I think he beat it because he is a good coach. He had not only two, but two of the best players I've seen in college football in recent years. He also took advantage of a Big 12 that was really diluted. It was an okay league, but by no means what he had last year in the Pac-12. So he mastered it. I mean, he didn't get to the championship game. He won't get to the playoffs, but he still did a remarkable job.
He's Paul Finebaum of the Mothership, host of the Paul Finebaum Show. Heisman Trophy race over? I
think so. I know fans in Boise want to make a case for their man, but I think Travis Hunter wrapped it up Friday, and I mean he's dynamic. Again, I don't know why the Jim Thorpe committee didn't think he was one of the best defensive players in the country, but those are little things that we make a big deal about. But I will be shocked if he doesn't win the Heisman Trophy.
Does Colorado try to extend Deion? I wonder. I don't know how that works with these coaches, and then we're going to give you, like West Virginia just, a year after giving their coach an extension, they fired him. So I don't know, the loyalty level there, but I haven't heard anything about Colorado and Deion.
Yeah. What these agents do now, and there's a handful of agents now. Deion's different; he's got a whole team. But I mean, you basically float a rumor that Deion's going somewhere, and then the next day the athletic director, reading his social media, goes hyperbolic and gives him an extension. I can't imagine they wouldn't extend him, but I think Deion's got to figure out what he wants to do. I frankly think he would make a very good NFL coach. Probably not in Dallas, but there'll be a few openings. Oh, actually, there may be by the end of the day, but we have one already. A couple more to come.
What do you make of Andrew Luck as the GM of Stanford football?
I thought that was a good move. I mean, Andrew Luck is a incredibly smart guy, and that's his school.
But what is the role of a GM?
Very important question. The GM does the same thing in college that they do in the pros. I mean, they are in charge of personnel. They watch the portal, Dan, which is now open. They deal with the money. However that works in college football, nobody is exactly sure. And they really run the player personnel side of college football. And that's maybe the most important position in college football that nobody really knows about or understands. I think he'll be great at it.
Most important game coming up this weekend will be what?
Well, probably the ACC game because you have SMU. They are now in the ACC, in case anybody missed that story. And they're playing Clemson, which just got knocked out of the CFP the other day by losing at home to South Carolina. But then Syracuse beat Miami. So I think Clemson can literally, here we go in NCAA basketball talk in March, they can steal a bid by getting that. If they lose, they're out. That's a fourth loss. SMU probably stays alive. Miami is the one that's Miami and Alabama are probably literally on that bubble, sweating it out. The SEC game will not affect anything. The ACC game will. I mean, there's a couple. Obviously, there are other games that affect one bid, but this game could affect several bids.
But I wonder, are we getting close to the point of getting rid of conference championship games because what's at risk if you suffer another loss? And like Georgia, you're saying Georgia is safe even if they lose the SEC title game? Yeah,
because they have two losses and they have the best win on the board right now in the country. They have a win over Texas, which will be number 2 tomorrow night. So that matters. I mean, I don't understand this committee. They value top 25 teams. I mean, there's some teams in the top 25, Dan, that are just putrid, but they get beneath. I mean, there's some teams in the top 10 that aren't that great. But ultimately, I think who have you beaten? Georgia has a great win. Alabama, by the way, has some epic losses that you mentioned. One, Vanderbilt's the other, 2 6-loss teams, but they do have a win over Georgia. So that will put them at least into consideration.
Good to talk to you as always, Paul. Thanks for joining us.
Pleasure, Dan. Thank you.
That's Paul Finebaum, the Paul Finebaum Show, weekdays from 3 until 7 Eastern. Also, SEC Nation. He's a busy man. And he was at the Iron Bowl between Auburn and Alabama.